Okay, let's get started. Welcome to Women History Month interview series hosted by Superposition Fremont and Foundation for Advocating Youth Education, FAY. My name is Ashita Singh.
And I'm Ria Shah, and we're going to be your co-host for today's interview. So today's interview is going to be split into two parts. We're first going to be talking about Miss Ambika's journey to where she, how she got here today, and her educational journey, and then we're going to be going into more of a women empowerment segment. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is, Ms. Ambika, could you please introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you currently do, and what was your biggest motivation to entering the career that you're in right now?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Like Ria mentioned, my name is Ambika, and I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow, and I work at Baylor College of Medicine in the lab of Dr. Huda Zogby, and she was actually a really great researcher who has done a lot of work in some rare genetic disorders, spinocerebellar ataxia type 1, and also Rett syndrome. So I'm, really fortunate to have the opportunity to spend some time working in her lab and, contributing towards some of the work in terms of understanding these complex disorders.
All right. Okay. And so if you could tell us a little bit about what was your biggest motivation into getting into medical research?
Yeah. So initially, the first set of research that I ever did was on cancer. And that was way back when I was doing my master's. And I was actually studying a type of oncogenic protein, RAS P21. And I was using these frog oocytes. So they're a type of South African frog that's called xenopus. And we were using these the oocytes from these frogs to study this oncogenic protein. And it was just fascinating to see, just how you can actually use these different model organisms to study diseases. And so I wanted to actually do a bit more in terms of understanding disorders and how we could use research to help patients with these disorders. So then I went on to a lab where we were actually using mice. So actually we use mice, and then we also use cultures neuronal cultures that we made from rats and also from mice. And then we could use these two different sort of systems to understand the process of myelination. So all nerves in our brain, or majority of nerves, are covered by this myelin sheath that allows the nerve impulses to rapidly travel from one neuron to the next. And that was a really great system to be able to understand this process of myelination. And from there, then I actually went on to do my PhD work and going more into specific disorders. And this time I was focusing on a particular region of the brain, which is the cerebellum. And the cerebellum is important for movement disorders. So when you think about anything that's involved in coordinating movement and maintaining balance, your cerebellum is involved in that. And I got a chance to work on some really rare disorders that affect a number of different patients, one of which is called ataxia-telangiectasia. And I know it's a long, complicated word, but it's shortened to AT. And it's funny because it's my initials as well. So it just happened to be that I started working on a disorder with the same that had the same initials as my name. But this disorder affects very young kids, and unfortunately, when they have this disorder, they become wheelchair bound by 8 to 10 years of age, and then they end up dying by the time they reach their early 20s. So it's a very devastating disorder. And in my graduate research, I was trying to understand what was causing these, why a mutation in this particular protein that causes this disorder, why it was causing such really severe symptoms in these patients. And was there anything that we could do eventually to be able to help these patients with this disorder? So that's kind of like why I really got into research and what drew me to neurodegeneration in general, because I really wanted to find a way to actually help patients.
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so our next question is, what are the biggest setbacks that you have faced on your journey to, entering your career of choice? Perhaps any issues that you faced. And what are the biggest setbacks that you have faced on your journey to, entering your career of choice? Perhaps any issues that you faced in the workplace itself?
Yeah. I would say, one of the issues, the biggest issues that I've had throughout my entire journey was my background. And why do I say that? So I came from a home where my parents didn't have anything more than an elementary school education. So they never even went on to college or, even high school. So um, and for me, it was always like I always felt as though I didn't belong when I was in undergraduate, doing my undergraduate work, or even in graduate school. And I heard people talking about their parents having all of these like fascinating careers. And for me, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, I don't have any of these things to say. I've never, people would talk about traveling to all of these places, the things that their parents taught them. And I actually didn't share any of those experiences. And so it always felt, there was a sinking sort of feeling that I just don't belong here. So it was one of the things that was always in the back of my head and always sort of like kept me back from really like being vocal about things sometimes, because I felt that it wasn't my place. So I would say that's one of the obstacles that has always been there with me. Even now when I have a PhD,
Yeah.
and I have to kind of like always remind myself when I start thinking about it that, not to go down that road.
Yeah.
Um, and I think so the second thing that I would say is when you feel in research, actually, a lot of things don't go the way you would like it to. So I would say at least like 80% of the time, things don't work. And that's always like a big slap in the face, I would say. Because you have to be optimistic, right, when you start any kind of experiment. But when that experiment doesn't work, especially when it's a big experiment that took several months, um, it really sets you down this path of like, okay, what am I doing? Like, did I choose the right path in life? So these are actually two of the biggest challenges I have actually faced.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is amazing to hear about, like how you came from your childhood all the way to where you are right now. All right. And finally, so I mean, our target audience is, definitely high schoolers and a lot of people who are currently thinking about entering college and, getting into like different careers. So do you have any specific advice for high schoolers in terms of, internships or other things that they can do like during their high school years or during their summers? That would help them, make a difference in their community or perhaps contribute to, to entering like research in medicine.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself is to really expose yourself to the wider world. So if there's anything that can expose you to different cultures, to different groups of people, right? So if you're in a school that has like students who belong more to like, people who are coming from a high socioeconomic background, take the opportunity to actually get involved in outreach programs to go to other marginalized communities and just see how these kids are what they have to do, the struggles that they're going through. And sometimes it will amaze you to see, just the strategies that they actually use to move themselves and to progress, through all of the obstacles that they face. Because, it doesn't matter how much things are always going your way, you're going to be faced with obstacles. And the older you get, the more like those obstacles are just going to be like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, what's going on here? um, and it's great to see how these kids and their families, they deal with these difficult situations that they're in, because I think it will really help you in the future to actually deal with your own problems that you're faced with. And one of the other things I would say as well is, don't narrow yourself to a particular field. Even if you say that you're interested in biology or chemistry, don't just follow the path of biology or chemistry. You know, get involved in literature, learn about some history, learn about some architecture, something, different things, because you never know, like one day, those things would also help you to kind of understand a little bit more about your place in the world.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, really good advice for our high school viewers. All right, so now I'm gonna let Ashita take over with the next segment about women empowerment and your experiences as a woman in the workplace. So
Sure.
thank you so much.
Mhm. Okay, so we will start right away. So you talked about your background, and while you were facing your obstacles, did you have any inspirations, especially from like aspiring women who inspired you to continue on?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most inspiring women, I would say, was the first person, the first job that I had here in research. So I worked as a research technician in a lab at Hunter College, which is a city university in New York. And this person, her name is Dr. Carmen Melendez Vasquez. And she was the first person who, like looked at me and gave me a chance, to actually do some research. And I really admired her because she's originally from Venezuela, and she worked her way to, going to the UK to do her master's degree and then her PhD work, and then, came to the US to do her postdoctoral work and did really, really great research. And during that time, also managed to have a family. So she was managing a family, and with two beautiful daughters, and at the same time, starting a new lab and mentoring students within that lab, people like me, who was actually doing research for the first time, and also other international students coming from China and coming from Eastern Europe as well. So, and at Hunter College, we have like many minority students, and many of these students were actually coming to her lab for mentorship, and she was just a great mentor to them. So she was definitely one of these people that I admire greatly.
Wow. I personally feel empowered by what you talked, the way you talked about her. And moving on to the second question, is there a specific moment in your life or your work where you felt being a woman held you back?
Huh. I I would say I don't think so. I haven't really had that experience of, thinking that as a woman, I don't feel that I don't have the same opportunities that men also have. So I have to say I haven't felt that way in my workplace, and I know that I'm fortunate because of
Mhm,
that.
mhm. So, for people who do face these challenges as a woman, what advice do you have for them, especially high schoolers who are pursuing, let's say, a STEM field, which is generally male dominated?
Yeah. So I know some of the fields that are dominated by men would be computer science. So if you're going into any sort of programming kind of environment, it's definitely dominated by men. And what I have to say is that you have to be true to yourself. And I think one of the things that we tend to do as women in general is if you have a question and um, if you have a question and then you think to yourself, well, I don't want to ask this question because then people will think that I don't know as much as I should actually know. And I would say don't do that, because too many other people do this. You have to ask your question to clarify, what is going on, and then get an answer to that question. Because by always silencing yourself, that is not going to help the situation. You have to go out there, ask your questions, because then you will learn more. Because sometimes you never realize you will ask a question, and the person that you're asking it to, even though you think that they know everything, they may even say to you, you know what? That's a really good question. I never thought about that. So I would say always ask your questions. I think it's the most important thing that you can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree, and I'll personally take heed to that. And also asking questions. I believe that's like the first thing you would do in scientific backgrounds, asking questions before you are able to engage into that field. Yeah. So thank you so much, Ambika, for answering all our questions and for giving this wonderful advice to our target audience, high schoolers.
You're
Thank
very
you very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.